Welcome back to AI Transformational Playbook, where we unpack what organizations are really experiencing as they navigate into the AI space through transformation, leadership readiness, and operational change. So today, again, I'm joined by our senior colleague and expert, Scott Archibald, an executive transformation strategist and former Gadler leader with deep experience helping organizations align strategy, execution, and business transformation. Scott, great to have you back.
Great to be here, Eric. Always fun to talk about this and kick around some stuff with you. So looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. So one thing we talked about in our last episode was why so many AI projects are struggling right now. Yeah. And one theme that kept resurfacing repeatedly, especially what you mentioned, was readiness. So organizations are moving aggressively into AI, but many of them are not actually prepared operationally, culturally, and strategically. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. We did talk about this last time a little bit. I think we mentioned this kind of, there's almost this panic. Everybody feels like they might be falling behind, and how do you just get going with something, which I'm all for. Hey, do something, learn from it. That's great. But I think as you get in, I think people are kind of past the exploration phase right now. And I think organizations are trying to get more out of the pilots. How do they really get some results and get into the business operations of this? And I think one thing as you go in with that, you have to understand, what is it you're trying to do? What are the objectives of the pilot or the objectives of the implementation? And what are your goals around that? And be realistic with that. I think sometimes organizations overestimate what they're capable of. So what are you working with from the standpoint of where's your data quality, for example? We talked about that last time, right? Data governance, data quality. Where's your process? I think you had a great quote last time that AI doesn't fix processes that are broken, but it sure does expose them, right? And so I think you really just have to go in with your eyes wide open and be realistic about what you can do and what other things you might need to do that are aside from AI, but are going to lay the foundation for that. And so being able to have that evaluation early on of how ready you are, and that's going to include not only the process, the data, but the organization. Is the culture of the company such that they are used to change? Or has nothing changed in 50 years at this company or 10 years? Then implementing AI right away is going to be a little tougher with some of your business processes. So I think all of those come into play.
Thank you very much for that, for laying that emphasis. So you heard him right. AI transformation does not start with just buying the technology. It starts with being ready. So understanding, leadership understanding, operational maturity, governance, data quality, and cross-functional alignment. So when things are weak, AI tends to expose the problems very quickly.
And I think that's what we're seeing is a lot of in the last couple of years where we saw a lot of these projects fail. We saw a lot of the pilots not meet up to expectations. Again, I don't think it was really the AI technology per se that wasn't working. I think people were trying to either move too quickly or operate on top of broken process, broken data, broken cultural issues that need to be resolved. And so I think people, as they're learning, I think they're starting to understand, well, what pace can I go at? What's going to work? Some organizations can move very quickly. They're smaller, they're maybe more innovative, they're used to doing things that sometimes don't work. When they don't work, they back out of it very quickly. You have other organizations that are very slow to move. That's just how their business is. One's not right or wrong. I think they're just different. And I think you have to understand, what kind of model are you in today? Even if that's not the model you want to be in tomorrow, but what are you in today? And what can you realistically get done? And how do you do some of that?
Yeah. So from readiness to AI literacy, I think so one of the biggest gaps that we are really seeing is AI literacy. So a lot of executives are making decisions without fully understanding their own capability, their limitations, the implementation realities, and governance implications. So how do you situate, what do you think about AI literacy and how organizations?
I think you're right. And I think this is where they just need a little bit of education. And we've seen this in the past with technology inflections in the past, whether it be everybody's going to have a PC on their desktop and that's going to make them more productive, right? Or the ERP systems years ago and what we thought was going to happen there, or cloud computing and what we went into with that. And this is the same thing. I think it's new. It came on obviously really fast. AI has been around for a long time, but the generative AI in the last couple of years really hit the boardroom pretty quick. And I don't think people really understood, executives, senior leaders really understood what generative AI and some of the new AI features could do. And they were just seeing what the media was telling them, which was in a lot of cases, best case scenario. And so I think being able to have a conversation starting with the board and working down from there, and that might be a half an hour to just get people to understand, here's how this works, right? So I think once you understand how AI works and how it pulls from the data sources, where it gets its content, how this whole machine, so to speak, works, then you start to understand, oh, now that I understand how it works a little bit, even at a very high level, I can start to understand what my expectations should be based on where AI is at this point in time. It can do some great things, but it can't do everything. And it can't, a lot of times you get the vision kind of mixed up with the practicality of it, right? And I think a lot of people are stuck on the vision, or at least were initially, of what it could do down the road, but practically today, it's just not there yet. And it's making progress every day. Obviously, there's a lot of money going into this. There's industries, the high-tech space and everything is really moving quickly on this, but it still has a long way to go to reach some of the visions that people have.
I think a bad readiness and literacy is going to lead to some sort of executive misalignment. I recently saw an organization aggressively pursuing AI automation because leadership expected to immediately cut costs, and their workflows were kind of inconsistent. Most departments were not really aligned with leadership and their ambitions, and the data quality wasn't also really reliable. So leadership, they moved into that phase with a lot of assumption, assuming that AI will apparently compensate for all those other weaknesses.
And I think the other thing, along with the literacy, along with the assessment work, that is a fraction of the time of what you'll spend overall on AI, but it's really important to do it up front, is to really, where is the organization? Where is the technology? What are your expectations? But where is the company or the organization? Where are they in deploying technology, in using technology? Again, some companies, based on either their culture or the industry they're in, they're much more likely to use technology early on and accept it and try new things. And others just aren't that way for a variety of reasons. They're maybe slower to move on new technology. Their employees are less likely to embrace it early on. And so I think you have to understand all of those things that surround this, and then start looking at realistically, now that I really understand, where are we from a technology standpoint? Where are we culturally? What do we really want to get done? Where are our business process? You start looking at all these things, and then you can start to get a pretty good idea of realistically, what kind of pilots can we do? Realistically, what should we expect from those? And realistically, what can we implement to help maybe our customers to save time, help with productivity, whatever the case might be that you're going after. But I think all of those are really important to consider. It's not just, we talked about this last time, we talk about all the time, it's not just implementing technology. That is a surefire way to fail, I guess, with this.
Yeah, so I can summarize all what you're saying. In organizations are trying to buy AI maturity instead of building operational maturity. And I think last time we lay emphasis on the pressure coming from hype or fear of falling behind.
Yeah, that's always the case, right? I think a lot of businesses, how do I stay in lockstep with my competitors? I don't want to fall behind too much because I'll lose market share. I want to stay ahead, or at least in the forefront. And so I think that kind of spills into when you have technology like this. I wouldn't say this is all the time with technology and IT, but I think when you have something that's very public like this, And this is why I keep going back to cloud and ERP and the PC and the client server architecture. Those were all very public. They got a lot of press. There were things that were talked about in the boardroom, or at least in the executive circles. So not all technology kind of fits into this. Security, I think, would be another one, right? The whole turn of security over time to the profile that it has now. When you have things like that are that visible and at that high of a level, you really have to make sure that people understand the reality of what they're talking about, but also the reality of what they're talking about within the space of their organization. So again, what one company can do may not be the same as what another company can do, whether it be more or less, right? So I think that's really important. And I think that's something that we miss sometimes. I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were talking about, date myself here and try not to do too much, but we were talking about years ago, people didn't know what to do with IT.
Absolutely.
And I think that's still the case sometimes, because now, before it was an organization, we really didn't even know what to call it a lot of times. It was information systems, it was information technology. We didn't know where to put it in the organization. Now it's evolved to where IT is everywhere. Technology is every business unit. Everybody's dealing with technology. You don't really have to wait for an IT group to give you something. You can go buy something or get something for free off the internet. And I think that's the same with AI. AI is now being packaged into a lot of software, a lot of
everywhere.
That's everywhere. And so when something explodes like that, then everybody looks to IT to rein it back in, but you can't, right?
Yeah, you still need to,
now. And I think this is, again, where the literacy comes in. When you have AI out there everywhere, and not just the boardroom, but every business leader in the company is probably doing something with AI or using it somehow. What are their expectations? So how do you not only get the board to be on the same page, but then how do you start training your organization of what they should expect, how they should use it, what they should use it for, what they maybe shouldn't use it for. And that's a continuous process. I think successful companies will see that as a continuous process that they'll put effort into. It's not just a one-time, hey, we're going to do a half-hour training kind of thing. Right.
Thank you for mentioning the press and cloud and IT and all of that. We are talking about AI. It still falls within the premises of technology, which is still, we have been there before. So I think most executives hear about massive AI gains in the headlines and in the press, and they immediately feel the pressure to move in quickly. It's in business, any transformation that is done emotionally never ends up well. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah. So organizations end up reacting instead of strategically planning before. Yeah. So that is where the readiness and literacy comes in, like you mentioned earlier.
And I think I don't want this to sound like, oh, you got to do all this planning and you have to wait a year or two until you do anything. You can move in parallel. You can do something in parallel with your readiness assessment, with your literacy work that you need to do across the company. I think the key is early on, which I think a lot of companies are moving out of this early on phase, but a lot haven't even really done much. This is the normal cycle of business and technology adoption, I think. Even as you're moving out of understanding where you want to go and going through that process, do some pilots. Just keep them small. Or else, again, there's nothing new here in my mind from a technology standpoint and how you implement technology.
Absolutely.
If you try and do 10 things at once, and it's successful, you don't know if all 10 things were successful. Was there one that was really successful and the other 9 kind of failed? You have to isolate things. You have to start small, understand what's going on. As you understand more, you can start to go faster. But again, this crawl, walk, run mentality, I think, is really important, and get everybody on the same page with not only what's possible, what are the aspirations of the company? If the company doesn't aspire to use AI in a big way, well, you don't want to be a business leader out there that's trying to use AI in some way that the company is not really supporting.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And vice versa. If the company really aspires to integrate AI into its business operations over the next 3 to 5 years or whatever it wants to do, and you're not really doing anything with it, well, you probably need to change how you're operating, right? So I think you have to understand what's the company's aspiration. I think senior leaders have to set that. And then people need to understand that and start working towards that.
Yeah, so when I wanna pay attention to what you're saying, you lay more emphasis on operational maturity, especially process discipline. And back to the headlines and the press, what I think is happening with content creation? There's a lot of rage bait. A lot of content creators who are not actually AI experts are getting into the space and doing a lot of rage baiting, creating content that brings in fear, and some executives are falling into that.
And I think it's interesting too, as we go through these assessments with companies and as we show them what you can and maybe can't do right away with some of the AI tools and technology out there, how are you going to measure success? And that's an interesting question. As you asked executives, if you ask business leaders, well, great that you're doing all this stuff with AI, how will you measure success? And the answer usually is, oh, we didn't really think much about that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
We just wanted to see what would happen, or we thought we could reduce our workforce or save some money. They gravitate towards the usual business operation levers. But I don't think that's really what you're seeing here. Now, every once in a while, you hear from somebody who says, oh, well, we wanted to allow our employees to work better or have access to more immediate answers to help our clients. That's starting to get a little bit more well thought out, right? But I think not everybody really understands what success looks like here, which is hard to be successful if you don't know how to measure where you are. I think that's, again, this isn't AI specific.
Absolutely.
But just a good business process, good way to run a program. How would you know you're going to be successful?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that it is not AI specific. Any broken process is obviously out of AI. Any broken process will give you bad results. So I've also seen organizations implement AI solutions inside poor quality data environments. Leadership is expecting these big results just because they're implementing AI, but they have not taken care of the weak operational discipline that existed before implementing AI. So everyone is thinking like AI is this mystery that's going to come everything, fix all the broken processes, the broken data. Meanwhile, AI still heavily depends on reliable inputs.
Right. And I think one of the things, as you think about literacy, as you think about assessments, setting your strategy, what's the vision that you have? What are the things that you don't want to do with AI? And I think that's really important. So there's some things that you probably want to do, but you should probably also be really clear in your company, what are the things we don't want to do with AI? We are not, and this doesn't have to be for everybody, but you might have a company that says, we don't want to replace employees with AI. We're not trying to change our workforce from that standpoint, but we are trying to augment our workforce maybe, or something like that, right? So I think, and what don't you want to do is really important. And you can't do that until you get to some kind of literacy, some kind of understanding of what's possible. And where do you want to go with your business? How does that help your business? And then you can start setting some of those goals as well.
And you're talking about moving into the AI process parallel with your other tasks. So do you think there's an underestimation of the importance of process maturity from the side of organizations or executives?
I think that's always been the case since the first organization was ever around. Yeah, I think, but it's really, we've mentioned this a number of times, it's really important when you start getting into AI, the process maturity and how well defined your processes are. A lot of businesses, and the pace of business has increased every year for the last how many years, forever it seems like, right? And so it's really hard to get to perfect process. And I don't think you need to get to perfect, but you got to have something that's pretty solid. And I think a lot of businesses, and I've been in organizations before where you get to good enough because you have other things to do and it works for now. That may not be good enough for AI. So what's good enough for a human when it comes to process, because the human can understand, oh, the process kind of fails here, but here's what we do. Right? Here's how I take it, whichever direction, how I make a decision, and then take it from there. AI can't do that, right? It has to be almost told what to do or learn over time. So that's where things, I think, from a process standpoint, start to break down, because you may have a process that you thought worked pretty well, but it was because your workers were interpreting what to do when the process broke, right? They had learned what the business rules were over time. AI will expose that, right?
Absolutely.
It will expose that there's nobody here to make the decision and the process fell apart at this point. And so that will be a learning for people.
I think it is often said garbage out, but I think with AI, it's going to be garbage in, amplified garbage out. So
garbage in, chaos, right?
So with AI, it's not only it's going to be amplified. So that's why it's very important to start with readiness and literacy before getting into the.
This is why I think we see a lot of, when you really look at the success with AI and some of the new tools and programs that people are doing right now, very successful when you get into task-oriented things. So a task is usually, it's obviously not the whole system, it's not the whole process. It's very specific. You can define it very well. And AI is really good at that, right? AI starts to break down most of the time with the process or ecosystem implementation, not because it can't do it, but because of this fact that the process is broken to start with. AI is really good at taking large amounts of data and consolidating into something that's more understandable, spotting trends in large data and things like that. Those are things that, just those things alone, the task assistance or from the task, the large data understanding, being able to do trend analysis and different things there, that can help so many people when implemented correctly. It doesn't replace them. It actually just helps them make better decisions in their job, move faster, right? So I think that all kind of comes into play. We're probably on some tangent here, but I think this does play into, these are the things you have to understand before you can set your goals, before you can set your vision.
Absolutely. They look like they are small, but I think now more than ever, in an automated world, those small things matter. And I think organizations are trying to scale AI before actually validating their smaller wins. So the aspect of thinking that people will be replaced is what it's making us neglect those small things like workflows and still working with people, communication, critical thinking, and leadership alignment. They are like little things, but in the business world, we know that little things is what brings bigger wins.
It's the little stuff that's really hard sometimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the details, right? It's easy to come up with a big vision and some ideas, say, well, we're going to do this, but the devil's in the details so much. Yes, it's the implementation that you'll get caught up in. That's what we're seeing today. That's why a lot of these pilots and different things aren't working. People are not getting the results that they expected. And I think we're just all learning through this. But I think taking from those learnings, we are seeing some things that you would expect to see with any new technology that comes out. It's not so much the technology and understanding that there's a little bit of a learning curve there because it's changing so much, but it's really all of these other things, the literacy, the assessment of where I am, the vision of where do I want to go, how fast can I get there based on how fast is the company usually able to move, the culture, all those things start to factor in with a major transformation. Just like they would any transformation, right?
I think you spoke about the work-run process, mentioning that a lot of, because we are not focused on those little things, we skip the crawl work and run process, and we are chasing the enterprise-wide transformations immediately. I think is the biggest mistake we are getting in this era. And
well, it's hard too because the little things aren't really the
visible.
They're not like, oh, I want to go do the little stuff or the stuff that's the building blocks. Everybody wants to race to the strategic, the real fancy stuff out there, right? And then you find, oh, well, I wasn't ready for that.
The things that make you look like a SMED when you mention it. Meanwhile, small pilot, fast learning, control risk, and operational feedback, those little things still matter very much in this AI integration.
And I think for people that are, if this is resonating with you and you're kind of thinking, we've tried a few pilots, but it hasn't gone well, we probably do need to step back and maybe do some work on literacy, do some work on the assessment, figure out our vision. We'd be glad to help you with that, right? This isn't, we talked about last time, this isn't months of work. This is a few days of work, really, getting the right people together and having the right conversations, which I think these are the conversations where you want to have people from the outside that are objective and can help you walk through the reality, versus if you try and do it internally and maybe a senior leader has a little bit more aggressive view of what can be done than everybody else who's dealing with reality, and nobody's going to question that person, right? Somebody from the outside is going to say, hey, it doesn't really look like you can move that fast. Or it looks like you're moving kind of slow based on everything that you guys are talking about, what I've seen in the past, right? So sometimes you want to bring somebody in, we can definitely help with any of that.
I think it's not actually just, I think I've seen organizations that took a very disciplined approach with AI. So they started with narrow use case, then leadership alignment happened early because they didn't neglect those little things. So they access their readiness before actually scaling. So
simple is really hard to do in anything in technology. Yeah. Simple is really hard. As humans, I think we want to make everything really complicated, right? So we want to do too much. We want to try and get things done too quickly. I think really trying to simplify things around what is it we're trying to do? What can we really get done? How fast can we really move? That's hard. I've seen time and time again where projects fail because we just made them too complicated. And if we would have simplified it and had maybe, I don't want to say less ambition, but we just took more bite-sized chunks, so to speak, I think we could have been more successful in the past.
Yeah. So, as a leadership transformation specialist that you are, I want you to talk a little bit about assessment, because I think before we started the show, you're telling me about assessment.
So I think when you look at assessment and you're doing an assessment, you want to really understand where you are today as a baseline. That's essentially what you're trying to do. And I think there's three main areas, and we talked about this last time. It's the people. So where's your culture? Where are the people at? It's the process or the business layers, right? What's going on there from a process standpoint, business-wise? Where are you moving with technology? How fast have you moved with technology in the past? What is it you're trying to do? And then there's the technology itself, right? What technology are you looking at or should be looking at? I think you start with those three areas. And the great thing about doing an assessment is you can do it no matter what the assessment is. You do it, you get a baseline, and then 6 months later or sometime down the road, you basically go through it again and say, how have we changed, right? How have we moved? Yeah. Maybe we digressed in some areas. Maybe we didn't move at all. Maybe we moved really far in some areas. Great. So it gives you a way to understand where you are today and then measure progress that you have or haven't made in the future and be able to do that multiple times. And so that starts to give you a way of, am I making progress? Back to this, we don't know what success looks like usually. This at least gives you an initial way to understand, are we moving forward? Then you can start looking at, hey, guess what? Maybe we don't have any success measures. Well, what should those be? And then you add that to the assessment and the scorecard, and you're now building a way to understand what's going on with AI in the company.
And you mentioned people readiness, which I think is very important because everything wrong with AI comes from the hype. We have this hype that is going around making people feel like AI will replace people. So when you're talking about assessment, you laid emphasis on people readiness. I caught that because I was like, oh, that is very important. Organizations need to pay attention to that. They still need to work with people to get this going. It's not just about using AI to replace people. It's far from that.
And in that people readiness piece, that's where you're going to have the literacy piece.
Absolutely.
Right. That's say, okay, if the people are very ready, is there literacy work that we still need to do? And if they aren't very ready, what literacy work do we want to do? Right. So I think those are some things to understand. What's the behavior of the workforce? How does the organization accept new technology? Is it a culture that embraces technology or one that doesn't? Those are all, is it one that embraces change or one that doesn't? Those are all going to factor into the people part of this.
Yeah, so I'll put people readiness before business readiness, technology readiness, and leadership alignment. And that's got a big difference between reactive AI adoption and strategic AI transformation. So,
So I think, and those are some of the things that, again, you look at the last couple of years, and I think traditionally when we talk about implementing new technology, we obviously focus on the technology layer, right? We sometimes focus on the business piece, the process, the vision, what we're trying to do. We usually ignore the people piece, right? And again, that's why a lot of projects fail, not only in the AI space, but in technology, because we don't look at all three of these and we get overly focused on the technology maybe a little bit on the business and ignore the people. And then we find out, wow, nobody wants to use this thing. Oh, well, we probably could have figured that out going into it if we would have looked at how well people adopt technology or change within the company. What's the culture of the company? And not so much what does the board think the culture is or HR thinks the culture is, but on the front lines, how do people really react when something new comes out or technology is available? Yeah.
Exactly. So if I have to summarize everything, AI literacy is not about coding. It's about making better decisions. AI literacy is leadership literacy. Assess readiness, honestly, improve executive AI literacy, fix operational weaknesses first, start with smaller pilots, and scale intentionally.
And I think the assessing the readiness, I think it's creating the baseline. Where are we today? Well, realistically, where are we? Whether you're further ahead, more advanced in some areas, or further behind and not as advanced in some areas, it's just understanding where are we today so you can measure progress as you move forward. That's the big thing with the readiness piece.
Yeah. So if organizations are trying to accelerate AI decisions while improving readiness and avoiding some sort of costly transformational risk, this conversation is exactly what the leaderships need to have everything going out right for them.
Yep. So it's good stuff. I always look forward to talking about this stuff, and hopefully it helps.
So you can, before we end, you can just give us all your contact details and how everyone can get to you.
So I think easiest way is I have a website. So it's just Scott, D as in David, Archibald.com. Scott Archibald 316 at Gmail is the email. And either way, either go to the website or just email me and you can get in touch through those things. LinkedIn and all the other normal places as well. So
same for me, Eric Bannavti at gmail.com. LinkedIn, Eric Bannavti Suiseka, the name is going to pop up. Then I have a library, banavlibrary.com. You can see my publications on there. So thank you very much for joining us on this another edition of the AI Playbook. And thank you for joining us. And we hope our series is going to help organizations out there understand what is going on and stop making emotional decisions that can cut their business later on. Thank you for this, Scott.
It's great. Thanks, Eric. It's great stuff.
Wong every nick in your kin kikus yake manin ki. Gloria.